You would never drive a 40-year-old car and then try to make it a self-driving car. You would never do that. You'd buy a new car. For some reason, what we do is we take this old 30-year-old technology and we put it on the cloud and then say it's modern. It's not modern. It's old. It's on the cloud.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Data Security Decoded by Rubrik Zero Labs. My name is Ghazal Asif. I am the Global Vice President of Channels, Alliances, and Inside Sales, and I am so excited to be your guest host for this episode. Now, this is a very special episode of the podcast because I sat down with Kris Lovejoy, the Global Security and Alliance Practice Lead at one of our most strategic partners, Kyndryl. Kris is a seasoned, passionate leader, and she's so passionate about shaping secure, resilient organizations. With her extensive background at companies like Ernst & Young and her current role at Kyndryl, she has a unique perspective on the intersections of technology, security, and business strategy. Kris also serves on the board of Dominion, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Dominion Energy, and is committed to advancing vital systems that power human progress. I had a fantastic time talking with Kris about her approach to cybersecurity, her thoughts on leadership, and her efforts to champion diverse security teams. I hope you find this conversation as insightful and inspiring as I did. So let's dive in. So, Kris, as you might be able to tell from my accent, I am certainly not from the US and certainly not from the DC area. I'm rocking a Scottish accent, a Scottish brogue over here. Now, like myself, many people that are not from the DC metro area, they mostly think of DC as Smithsonian museums and politics. What is something that you found is one of the biggest underrated parts of the DC culture?
So I'd say two things, and they go hand in hand. First, the restaurants. If you're a foodie, there is no place better on earth to go than Washington, D.C., because any food you can possibly imagine is here. And there are at least 3 restaurants that serve whatever it is that you could imagine. And I think, the reason for that is because this may be the most multi-ethnic place I've ever traveled to. And so it's a wonderful place where you get to meet people from every possible country, every race, every religious background. It's just really a fascinating place to be.
Oh, that's wonderful. Sounds like dinner is due then.
Absolutely.
Can't wait to do it in person for sure. So, Kris, let's talk a little bit about your career and leadership. You've had an illustrious career leading security practices at organizations like IBM, the World Economic Forum Cybersecurity Committee, EY, as I mentioned, and most recently, Kyndryl. Looking back, was there any trend or moment in cybersecurity that really surprised you?
Oh, my goodness. I wouldn't say that it was a moment. I think I have, over the years, changed my perspective on security quite a bit. And that came from, and I know I'm sounding a little bit like mom, but, when I came into the industry, I was, I've always been passionate about the industry, but I was passionate about the fact that, there's so many different ways in which you can solve a security problem. And I still believe it is true that every company is different, every organization is different, and the way that you need to solve those problems are really going to be a reflection of the culture of the organization, the amount that you can spend, the amount of risk that you're willing to take. But back in the day, I thought that it was really just up to the company to decide how to do that. And I was not anti-compliance, anti-regulation, but I wasn't a huge supporter of kind of a regulated community. I have to say, since that time, I've kind of changed my perspective. What I found over the years, and maybe perhaps this is overly cynical, but People spend money to improve security and resilience for one of three reasons. One, there's a compliance requirement. That's the biggest one. Two, there's a crisis. Or three is, somebody on the board or the C-suite all of a sudden, reads the paper, gets worried, and cares about the subject. Of all of those three, the most kind of proactive and positive, weirdly enough, is regulatory authorities requiring organizations to implement at least baseline control. And so for that reason, until this market kind of wakes up and understands how to measure, security risk, how to invest in security risk, I think that the role of compliance is critically important.
It's so interesting because I haven't ever really looked at it from that perspective, because I guess as human beings, we have our own opinions and our own biases in nature. And I guess when it comes to cybersecurity, you do need higher authority figuring out a consistent baseline across the board without our sort of human biases and our own opinions coming into play. It's such a powerful perspective.
Yeah, and I also think, at the end of the day, people don't want to spend money on something that they don't know whether it's going to happen or not, right? And so, if you're talking about, keeping the lights on or paying for security control, there's kind of no question as to what people are going to do. But that said, there has to be some baseline foundational investment. And in absence of the market knowing how to do it themselves, there has to be some enforcing authority.
Absolutely. Makes so much sense. Such a powerful perspective. Now, Kris, we are very fortunate to see women like you stepping into senior security leadership roles more frequently. And I know that you're a massive advocate for diversifying our cybersecurity workforce. So thank you for that on behalf of everyone that represents a diverse group. What stands out to you in organizations with diverse security and IT teams compared to those that don't have them?
I'm going to answer this question in a way I don't think people are going to necessarily expect. And I'm going to echo something my sister said, who's actually, my sister's fairly well known in the technology field herself. Her name is Julianne Galina. And, when asked, what's the difference between kind of men and women, in security, she said, well, I bring a handbag to meetings. And I was sort of like, okay. And, the point being, at the end of the day, it's not like there's no big cosmic, kind of, sort of intellectual difference between men and women. There's no, at the end of the day, there's no big cosmic difference in the way they work. What I think is important, and it's not just about women, it's about bringing in any underrepresented community into the organization, because it's a reflection of the organization's ability to actually understand the population through whom it serves. And the population that they serve is a very diverse group of men and women, there's so many different constituencies here that have to be dealt with. And if you only have one point of view, then you're going to always solve the problem in the same way. Different perspectives, different experiences, it forces an organization to serve the customer, to understand risk, to solve risk-oriented problems in different ways, because they have, people who think differently. And so again, to me, it's not just about women per se, it's about a different way to think about risk. And that can only be accomplished if the organization is willing to take risk, to take in those underrepresented people, and then to ensure that their voices are part of the process.
Yeah, I love that. So well said. Now, thinking about business priorities, as you mentioned, cyber resilience, incredibly important. And we're finding more and more of our customers are saying that cyber resilience is a business imperative, something that we know that Kyndryl believes in, we believe in, you passionately believe in too. Do you have a sort of overarching philosophy for integrating cybersecurity with business resilience? And can you share your thoughts about that?
In fact, a few years ago, I put my foot down when we launched Kyndryl and we were building the practice. I put my foot down and I said, you know what? I believe that security as a field, as an industry, is too narrow. I actually think that security needs to be subsumed into the concept of cyber resilience. Cyber resilience is an outcome that one achieves. Cybersecurity is a risk management process, which, by virtue of you implementing effective security, you can get better resilience. So I think it's a different, just from a vocabulary perspective, they're kind of different things. But that said, get semantics aside, I believe in today's world, and this is based on my experience, having been a CISO, having been a vice president of IT risk, managing, these teams, that, as I said, the security is too narrow. At the end of the day, if I am responsible as a business leader, responsible for my business, what I care about is my process, am I able to continue to operate? Is my data secure? And if there is an issue, I have to react to that issue, and I have to do it as effectively as possible. What I don't want to have to do is sit there at the time and say, oh, gee, this is a network outage, so let me scramble and find the network people. Oh, this is an application hardware outage. Let me scramble to find those people. Oh, it's a security outage. Let me find those people. Oh, it's a third-party risk outage. Let me find these people. At the end of the day, a problem is a problem is a problem. Solve the problem. You have to have people working together to solve the problem. Creating these silos is not good. And so I've kind of we've redefined cyber resilience as being the ability to anticipate, protect against, withstand, or recover from any and all cyber-related events, including, but not limited to, cybersecurity. So when we look at cyber resilience, we're looking at a number of different categories. We look at cyber as a category. We look at privacy as a category, third-party risk as a category, network outages as a category, application and hardware failures as a category, human error as a category. So we've got lots of different, and data center. I could go on. These are all categories of risk. When we react, it's the same team reacting to all of those things, because in the fog of war, you don't know what category it belongs to, nor should you care, because you have to deal with the issue. And so, what we're all about is integrating various teams, functions, and silos together in such a way that they can all work together to achieve that goal of cyber resilience, which for me is all about, the operational enablement of the business, of the organization, security being one category of risk that enables you to get to that outcome.
Well said. I absolutely love it. So if we take that and we sort of take a step further, what advice do you have for our IT and security listeners looking to communicate their strategy to non-technical business leaders? And a lot of the times, the strategy might not even be that comprehensive. It might be new. It might be ever-changing, might be ever evolving. It might not have the inputs of the non-technical leaders. So how do they go about communicating it?
I'll take this question in a couple of ways. One is, when it comes to talking about a resiliency strategy, what I see organizations doing badly is you have disaster recovery, business continuity, and security typically will come into the room with their own separate strategy, and they stick it into one PowerPoint presentation. That is not a comprehensive, cohesive strategy. Right? Putting it in one deck does not count. You actually have to.
Like putting it all in one deck, does that not count? If it's just like one deck, it just seems like it's one.
Just like, right. No, just because it has three parts and one, agenda slide, that does not mean you've got a good strategy. So to build the strategy, I always, would say start with just, do a tabletop, right? And start with a tabletop where you have something like a ransomware event. Ransomware event comes in, impacts the organization, also impacts the backup infrastructure. All right, now what are you going to do? And force the team to really think about, what did I do wrong? Like, what happened in so much as now I can't bring back this business service. I didn't, have golden images of my system configurations. I didn't have access to my data. Didn't have the phone numbers of the people, whatever it is. By working through that, it helped you find the holes, and you're able to build a very, very practical strategy that can be communicated because your executives want to understand what it is that you're doing within the context of something that can actually happen. So what you don't want to do is, create a scenario like the aliens are coming in, and it has to be a realistic scenario because people are willing to spend money to protect themselves against things they think are going to happen. That's first and foremost. Now, when it comes to communicating, I tend to use a lot of analogies. One of my and I'll give you an example of an analogy. This is one of my more famous ones. Back when I was CISO of IBM, what we wanted to do was stop people from using a USB. And because we were afraid of malware propagation from all these USBs that you were picking up at conferences. And so, I was explaining it to the team, and I said, all right, I want you to think about it this way. You were walking down the street, and in the gutter, there was a toothbrush. Would you pick that thing up and put it in your mouth? If the answer is no, you're not putting that USB in that computer. And I can tell you that after I said that, everybody was like, oh, ew, no more USBs. Those USBs are not going in the computer, because it was like a visceral thing. And I know it's gross, but that was a gross example, but it's this combination of humor and the analogy that people can get their heads around. It's really important because it's the way that they can understand the problem is that they can put it into a context that makes sense to them. But what we tend to do as security people is we tend to over-engineer not only the solution, but we engineer the way in which we communicate it. And what bigger technical words does not make us smarter, right? Doesn't. You got to be able to make the point to an executive in such a way that they'll spend money. And that means using simple language, being very clear, concise, practical, and as I said, combining the humor and, the scenarios.
I love it. We call it buzzword bingo here at Rubrik. And so when the team is, especially when we're learning about Rubrik's platform, what we do, and often we say to folks, okay, play it back to me without using any buzzwords. And then you really can demonstrate that you comprehend and understand what we do and communicate it in a clear and simple way, because that's what resonates with people. Otherwise, you start using all of these buzzwords, this technical jargon with the wrong audience, and you've lost people. And the last thing you want when it comes to security is not having people in the room with you, even though they physically might be there, but they're not really in the room with you.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. So I love the analogy example. Is there another time that comes to mind? And I'm sure you've got so many when your cybersecurity initiatives have had a direct positive impact on business outcomes.
Well, that's a really tough one, because when you do a good job, nobody knows.
Right. Yeah.
So, what I tend to look at is kind of the reverse is, what is the amount of time we've spent, actually investigating. It's kind of, I know I hate to say it, but it's more the positive is in understanding kind of the amount of time you're spending on the negative. That's one way that I always measure it. And the second way I measure it, and I know this seems a little weird as well, is on the cost effectiveness of security. People tend to think about how much to invest in security kind of the wrong way. So another thing I've learned over the years is it's the organizations that spend the least per capita on security are oftentimes the most secure. Now, it sounds like a paradox, but the reason is those that spend the least per capita for security, what it generally means is you can't actually account for the security spend because everybody in the organization is participating. Everybody in IT is actually doing a security task. All of the employees, everybody is participating in it. And because everybody's participating, you can't cull out the security spend separately.
Very interesting. Kris, going back to, we were talking about regulations and governance and how important that is. I mean, I think we can both agree that regulatory readiness has become more and more difficult for global organizations, especially organizations that are all across the world, different entities like Kyndryl, to navigate regulatory compliance has become very difficult. You've got new frameworks coming in, and as they mandate rapidly and develop new things are being developed and adopted. What do you think are the critical factors that organizations need to consider to be regulatory ready in today's complex cybersecurity landscape, especially for global organizations that are sprawling all over the world with different countries and each country having their own regulatory requirements?
This is a real tough one. And I think that the balkanization of security rules over the past few years, this is the irony. I'm very pro-regulation, but on the other hand, I wish that there was some internationalization, standardization, kind of some form approach to addressing these compliance requirements. What we've seen over the years is that, in this kind of heightened nationalist kind of environment that we're in, that many of the nation states have introduced regulation that is very bespoke to the country. We saw this in privacy. We're beginning to see this in cyber. And it makes it very expensive, very hard for organizations to comply because the way in which the regulation is transposed in a local level can be very different, if you're operating in France versus Italy versus the United States, whatever the case may be. So I think the most important thing is to think about kind of your policy architecture, if you will. What do I mean by that? So if you think about it sort of as a layer cake, all organizations for the most part have adopted a framework. That framework, whether that be, like CSF 2.0 or whatever it is, and that framework then applies to or has a set of controls that are linked to, so the framework has a policy, and the policy is sort of the way in which you communicate how you're going to sort of meet the framework, the framework requirements or objectives. Then in that policy, you've got the controls. This is the real detailed how you're going to meet each of the policy requirements. And then tied to those controls, you have standards. And the standards are kind of in the country for this server. This is how I'm going to actually implement. Now, if you think about it as kind of a layer cake, and you think about mapping all of those standards to the controls to the policy to the framework, what can happen is you're able to, when you go from country to country, say, okay, in France, in order for me to meet this policy, I have to implement these controls and these standards. Whereas in Italy, I'm going to implement this policy, the same controls, but different standards. So if you have that way of implementing, then you have a way of managing and measuring, because that at the end of the day is what, sort of compliance is about, is your opportunity to actually continuously monitor and measure compliance with the standards that have been implemented. And so it takes a lot of work to get this in place. Once you have, it's automatic, but it does require some thought nowadays.
Yeah, it sounds like it, especially when you've got global organizations, then you've got regulations that are vastly different. The implementation of those regulations, as you said, vastly different from one country to another. And then you've got regulations that change and differ from one industry and one vertical and the other. So sounds like it's investment and upfront work, but definitely worth it in the long term.
Oh no, it's I was just writing a note to some of our folks. We've got a bunch of customers that are, you know, so DORA is the new financial regulation for resilience in Europe, and I'm reaching out to manufacturing companies in Japan because they have to be DORA compliant because they have financing arms that operate in Europe. And so, but the customers don't even know. And so we're going through the process of telling them, no, you are subject to these rules. And these are the gaps that we're seeing in your operations. But I don't think people recognize the extent to which, you might think I'm a manufacturing organization. This has nothing to do with me. Guess what? It may. And so you have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, very, very complex. Are there any regulatory gaps that you think need to be more urgently addressed by policymakers globally?
Supply chain.
Supply.
Absolutely. The supply chain has to be addressed. We're not, we talk about, sort of left of boom, right of boom. That's a left of boom issue. We've got to figure out what the obligations are going to be, vis-a-vis supply chain. I think there's some good rules that are coming out, some good models that can't be implemented, but they make sense. On the right of boom side, I'd say, and this is the space that, we both do a lot of work in, which is more around cyber vaulting. I think that the rules that are coming out in Europe, the resilience requirements are really good, and they're forcing organizations to reconsider this entire space, which is fabulous. I'd love to see a bit more specificity around what's required because customers still don't really understand what's needed here. And then also, I'd like to see this as more of a ubiquitous requirement because let's face it, the cyber threat landscape at this point is in a place where we cannot protect ourselves against everything. And if we are a vital, critical infrastructure industry, we need to have the secondary capacity to recover ourselves. That cannot be done today with storage, backups, and DR the way we've implemented in the past. It has to be changed. And so I'd say that is one of the other areas I'd say has to be addressed is really in and around this cyber vaulting space.
Makes sense. And if you're a customer listening to us, come and speak to Kyndryl and Rubrik about it. We can help you there.
That's right.
So in cybersecurity, Kris, we talk a lot about terms like hygiene and posture to refer to how organizations prepare for attacks. What do you believe are the critical components of that preparation phase so the organization can swiftly identify and address events?
So let's start with the inventory. If you don't know it, you can't secure it, and you can't back it up or make it sustainable. So know it. That's number one. Number two, currency management. I don't know why people think that it is okay. Like you would never drive a 40-year-old car and then try to make it a self-driving car. You would never do that. You'd buy a new car. For some reason, what we do is we take this old 30-year-old technology and we put it on the cloud and then say it's modern. It's not modern. It's old. It's on the cloud. And so, it's making sure that you don't have a huge percentage of end-of-life technology. So, you can actually patch it and configure it and log it and monitor it and do all of those basic, ITIL-like service management things. That's really important. So, again, there's nothing miraculous about this. It's all the basics. All the basics. Know it, patch it, make sure it's up to date, make sure it's well configured, make sure you're changing your default passwords. I mean, this is not rocket science, but I can tell you that when I see breaches, you can be absolutely sure something associated with that foundational layer went wrong.
Right. So back to the basics, back to the foundations. There's no silver bullet. Kris, I could spend hours talking to you. It's fascinating. I'm enjoying every second of it, but we are coming up on time. So I have one last question for you. We started this conversation looking back in your career, and we've developed a routine of asking leaders that come onto this podcast in cyber to look forward. seeing where we are headed, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of cybersecurity?
I'm always optimistic. So I think, every year it's the recognition that it's an issue gets better. And so, we're not there yet. We'll always have work to do. And as, assuming that we're always going to be digital, there will always be more work to do. But I see, people like yourself, wonderful vendors like Rubrik, coming into the industry and, really profoundly helping customers improve. And so I think between all of the innovation that's happening in the space, plus the C-suite recognition, plus the kind of the external market recognition, I think that, it'll take it, it's, we're still going to have to keep fighting the good fight, probably forevermore, but, we're at least in the fight.
I love it. Love your optimism. Really thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, Kris. Thank you so much for joining us here again on the Data Security Decoded by Rubrik Zero Labs, and can't wait to hopefully continue this conversation and have you on again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.